tonight with a public appeal for missing British backpacker Grace Millane. A short time ago, police held a press conference to appeal for sightings of the 22-year-old who has not been seen since 7:15 p.m. on Saturday night.
On behalf of New Zealand, I want to apologise to Grace's family. Your daughter should have been safe here, and she wasn't, and I'm sorry for that.
Grace Emmy Rose Millane was born in Essex, England in 1996. Raised by her parents, David and Julian, she was the youngest child in the family, with two older brothers, Michael and Declan. Warm, vibrant, and deeply rooted in her family, Grace had a natural pull toward creative and artistic pursuits. She went on to study at the University of Lincoln, earning a degree in advertising and marketing. With her studies behind her, she was ready for something bigger, something that was entirely her own. She had spent a full year carefully setting money aside for a backpacking journey that would take her across the world. Those who knew Grace described her as someone who led with kindness and empathy. It showed in the quiet, generous gesture she made before she left. She cut off her long hair and donated it to the Little Princess Trust so that it could be turned into wigs for children battling cancer. In October 2018, Grace said goodbye to her family home and stepped into her adventure. The spirited and curious graduate had already passed through Peru, spending 6 weeks moving across South America. She connected with fellow travelers as she went and made sure the people back home could follow every step of her journey. On November 19th, 21-year-old Grace touched down in New Zealand, traveling alone. 11 days later, she reached Auckland. She checked into a hostel called the Base Backpackers on Queen Street, settling into a shared room with other guests. Saturday evening, December 1st, 2018. Just before 6 p.m., Grace stepped out of the hostel and made her way into the city centre. She was wearing a knee-length black dress, white shoes, and carried a small handbag. She had plans. She was going to meet someone she had connected with on Tinder. At first, Grace had been hesitant about the meetup, but the conversation had continued. The back and forth had grown more comfortable, and eventually the two settled on a plan to go for drinks. Grace met her date at Sky City, an entertainment complex housing bars, restaurants, and a casino. Back home, her friend Amina was receiving messages from Grace. "I click with him so well," she wrote. "He's an oil manager. He lives in a hotel." By all accounts, the evening was going well. Roughly an hour in, the two moved on to a venue called the Bluestone Room. At one point during the evening, Grace got up from the table. In that moment, the man sitting across from her reached over, picked up her handbag, and began going through it. Then, just after 9:30 p.m., the two walked out of the bar together, arm in arm, and continued down the street. The following day was Sunday, December 2nd. It was Grace's 22nd birthday. Messages were coming in. Family and friends back home were reaching out, posting on her social media, trying to get hold of her. But Grace wasn't responding. Both of her phones were going straight to voicemail. For someone who had been flooding her loved ones with photographs and updates every single day, the silence was immediate and jarring. Her brother Declan noted that she had been overwhelming them with details and pictures throughout her entire trip. No response on her birthday was not just unusual, it was alarming. Grace was a home bird, and this was a red flag. Her parents contacted Auckland police and filed a missing persons report. On December 5th, officers reached out to the Base Backpackers, where staff confirmed that Grace had not returned to the hostel on the night of December 1st. Initially, police saw no immediate indication of foul play. The majority of her belongings were still sitting in her room. Perhaps she had fallen in with new friends and simply lost track of time. Perhaps there was an innocent explanation, but the answers were already beginning to surface. Thanks to the sheer volume of CCTV footage captured across the city, investigators were able to piece together Grace's movements from that Saturday evening relatively quickly. The man she had spent the night with was identified without much delay. On the very night Grace was last seen, she had updated her profile picture on Facebook. Underneath that picture, a comment appeared. Beautiful, very radiant. The person who had left that comment was the same man seen with Grace on camera that evening. His name was Jesse Kempson. He had also published a post around the same time that drew further attention. Extracts of the post spoke of being sorry for his mistakes, his arrogance, and his selfishness.
So, who exactly was Jesse Kempson? Jesse was 26 years old, born in Wellington. He had moved repeatedly throughout his childhood following his parents' separation, spending stretches of time being raised by his grandparents, and had drifted far from most of his family. Everyone who had encountered Jesse described the same thing. He was a pathological liar.
He told people he was a cousin of a celebrated All Blacks rugby player. He told people he was dying of cancer. He deceived employers, landlords, partners, and the people closest to him over and over again. And time after time, the fabrications collapsed around him. Evictions followed. Jobs disappeared. One former landlord recalled Jesse claiming to be a professional softball player, signed to New Zealand's national softball team, the Black Sox. He said contract money was on its way. 8 weeks of excuses later, the landlord contacted the Black Sox management directly. The lie fell apart instantly. At the City Life Hotel, where Jesse was currently staying, he had told staff he was a senior manager at Woolworths. In reality, his rent was being covered by state benefits. His most recent job had been in telephone sales. That too had ended in dismissal due to his lies. That dismissal had happened on December 1st, the very same day he met Grace Millane.
Jesse was the last known person to have been seen with Grace. He was the person police needed to speak to most urgently. On December 5th, the same day Grace was reported missing, he was asked to come into the station to answer some routine questions.
Tell us about Grace.
So I was talking to Grace on Tinder.
Yeah.
We'd matched on Friday. I saw that we'd matched the next day on Saturday. And then we met at Sky City. And then we decided that we were going up to Andy's Burger Bar, which is on the first floor.
Whose idea was it to go to that particular burger place?
Me. Because I didn't initially know that she was real.
What do you mean?
Well, there's a lot of... So have you heard of catfish?
No.
So catfishing is where someone uses your profile, or uses your photos and pretends to be you and then meets, and you're a completely different person.
How does meeting in a public place sort of protect you from meeting someone who's not as good looking as...
Well, there's security there. So if she wasn't who she said she was, at least in my mind I'd feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's us.
Down there?
Yep. So she's going that way, and I'm going across the street. I go down Queen Street. I go down Victoria Street, straight down to the bottom, and then hang a left, and I head towards the viaduct.
You've kind of walked in a bit of a funny direction if you were planning to go to the viaduct. Is there a particular reason you were going to do that?
I feel safer down that way.
And we're very, very concerned for her safety, obviously. It's entirely possible that she's been the victim of foul play.
Okay.
You understand what that means?
Yeah.
What would your feelings be about providing us with a voluntary DNA sample in the event that we can compare that against something? Would you be happy with that?
100%. I mean, I know I haven't done anything wrong, so I'm happy to do it.
Okay. At this stage, we don't know what's happened to this girl.
Okay.
It's possible that somebody has killed her. Okay. You understand that?
Yeah.
She might. When I say foul play, I mean that someone might have murdered her. I don't know if she's been murdered or not yet. She may be alive and well.
Okay.
But she might also be dead.
Okay.
Okay. And it could be that you've done it.
Hey, I just want to ask a question. Am I being arrested for something I didn't do?
You haven't been arrested, mate.
Sorry. Holy shit.
Jesse maintained that nothing out of the ordinary had taken place that evening. He said the date had wrapped up warmly with a hug, a kiss on the cheek, and a plan to see each other the following day, before the two eventually went their separate ways at around 10 p.m. He added that when he had tried to message Grace the next day on Tinder, he noticed she had unmatched him, and that, he claimed, was the last of it. But the officers had not yet finished working through the CCTV footage from the City Life Hotel, and what they were about to uncover would change everything. A deeply troubling picture was beginning to form. Close to 6 terabytes of CCTV data were being carefully examined, and despite Jesse's account of the two parting ways on the street, footage told an entirely different story. Both Jesse and Grace were captured arriving at the City Life Hotel together, arm in arm. The cameras followed them into the lift. They stepped out together on Jesse's floor. Grace was never seen leaving the building. The morning after, on what would have been Grace's birthday, Jesse was picked up on camera stepping out of the hotel alone. Officers tracked his movements across the city throughout the hours that followed. He left the hotel and went shopping. He purchased a suitcase. He then went out again to pick up cleaning supplies. Just before noon, he climbed into a taxi and made his way to a car rental company, where he hired a red Toyota Corolla. Several hours later, Jesse met with another woman he had been speaking to on Tinder. She would later tell police that the conversation had taken a deeply unsettling turn. He spoke about burying bodies. He mentioned friends who were police officers. The woman felt so uncomfortable that she refused his offer of a lift, made her own way home, and never contacted him again. After this, Jesse headed back out into the city center. This time, he went to hire a Rub Doctor carpet cleaning machine, telling staff that he had red wine stains that needed seeing to. Later that evening, at 9:30, Jesse loaded 2 suitcases onto a hotel trolley and transferred them into the Toyota he had rented earlier. At around 7 a.m. the following morning, he was caught on camera again, this time purchasing a shovel. 2 hours after that, he was filmed power washing the car. He then returned the vehicle to the rental company, where it was subsequently hired out by another customer. On December 5th, the day Grace was reported missing, Jesse was observed visiting a series of locations and disposing of items in public bins. Police arrived at the City Life Hotel to bring him in for further questioning. As officers approached the front desk, Jesse walked back into the hotel at precisely the same moment. The instant he spotted them, he turned sharply and began moving away, his head fixed firmly in the opposite direction. The officers noticed. They moved quickly, caught up with him, and brought him in.
Tonight with a public appeal for missing British backpacker Grace Millane. A short time ago, police held a press conference to appeal for sightings of the 22-year-old who has not been seen since 7:15 p.m. on Saturday night.
On December 7th, David, Grace's father, had flown to Auckland. He stood before the cameras and made an emotional plea to the public.
I'm David Millane, Grace's dad. Thank you for coming today. As you know, Grace has been missing for several days. We last had contact with her on Saturday the 1st of December, and as a family we've been extremely concerned for her welfare. Grace is a lovely, outgoing, fun-loving, family-orientated daughter. Grace has never been out of contact for this amount of time. She's usually in daily contact with either her mother, myself, her two brothers, members of the family on social media. She arrived here on the 20th of November and has been bombarding us with numerous photographs and messages of her adventures. We're all extremely upset, and it's very difficult at this time to fully describe the range of emotions we are going through.
The investigation was accelerating. Without naming him directly, police confirmed they had spoken to Jesse and that he was a person of interest. As the hours continued to pass, anxiety across the nation deepened. Officers stated publicly that they held grave concerns for Grace's safety. On December 8th, as the weight of the evidence continued to grow, Jesse was taken back into custody and interviewed again. This time, his account had shifted dramatically.
That you're willing to speak to us about the events of last Saturday, is that correct?
Yes.
Tell me what happened last Saturday.
She started talking to me about 50 Shades of Grey. We started having sex. At first it was just normal. And then she asked me if we could get into bondage, having, I guess, more violent sex. We ended up on the floor, and then she told me to hold her throat. So I went into the shower, and then all I remember is falling asleep in the shower. I need to stop. I need to go.
Jesse claimed that when he woke the following morning and found Grace dead, he had been overwhelmed. He said he panicked, placed her body inside a suitcase, and drove out to bury her. He continued to deny any responsibility for her death.
I didn't know what to do. I went downstairs and I was just, I don't know, I was all over the place.
You come out of the shower,
Yep.
The light's been on in the shower,
Yep.
You put a towel around you, You've turned the light off, and then you've returned to your bed and you've gone to sleep in your bed.
Yep.
And at that point, when you exit the shower, you don't look around, but your assumption from the silence.
I thought that she had gone. I thought she had left.
We're going to head out of here very, very soon, and you're going to take us to where you've buried her.
Yeah.
She will likely be exhumed tomorrow.
Okay.
At some point, and after that, a pathologist, a specialist doctor, will perform a post-mortem.
Yeah.
They're very skilled at establishing people's causes of death. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
Did you kill Grace Millane? Okay. Jesse Kempson, you're under arrest for the murder of Grace Millane.
The forensic sweep of Jesse's hotel room added yet another layer to the already harrowing picture. Despite his attempts to scrub the space clean, Grace's blood had soaked into the floor throughout the room. Armed with what Jesse had told them, it did not take long for police to focus their search on an area along Scenic Drive near the Waitakere Reservoir. Shortly after 4 p.m. that day, officers discovered a body approximately 10 yards from the roadside.
The area was identified late last night as a location of interest as a result of our investigative work. I can now advise that a short time ago we located a body which we believe to be Grace. The formal identification process will now take place. However, based on the evidence we have gathered over the past few days, we expect that this is Grace. The focus now is to piece together exactly what happened to a young girl who came to New Zealand on her OE. Obviously, this brings the search for Grace to an end. It is an unbearable time for the Millane family, and our hearts go out to them. Any father, any parent in this situation will struggle. I feel for my other daughter in her 20s. We're putting a lot of support around him. It's difficult because he's here with a brother from England and the rest of the family are back home.
Detective Inspector Scott Beard had been leading the investigation from the front, working in close contact with the Millane family throughout. For him and everyone on his team who had held on to hope of finding Grace alive, the moment was devastating. The grief did not stay contained within the investigation. It spread outward, across the entire nation. Thousands of people came together to pay tribute to Grace. Vigils were held throughout the country. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern addressed the nation and spoke directly to Grace's parents, offering her personal condolences and the full support of her country.
I cannot imagine the grief of her family and what they will be experiencing and feeling right now. And my thoughts and prayers are with her father, David, who is in the country, her mother, Gillian, who cannot be here, and her wider family, friends, and loved ones. And so, on behalf of New Zealand, I want to apologise to Grace's family. Your daughter should have been safe here, and she wasn't, and I'm sorry for that. I've advised the family through the police that if there is anything we can do to assist, we are here to help with that.
Following this, Jesse Kempson was formally charged with the murder of Grace Millane. On December 10th, just 5 days after Grace had been reported missing, Jesse appeared in court in Auckland. He was granted an interim name suppression order to protect the integrity of a future trial. It was for this reason that so much of his interview footage remained blurred for an extended period of time. Following the completion of an autopsy, a pathologist confirmed that Grace had been strangled. Bruising was present across her arms and chest, consistent with having been pinned down with significant force. The pressure applied to her neck would have needed to be sustained for between 4 and 5 minutes to have proven fatal. At around 1:30 a.m. on that Sunday morning, as Grace lay dead inside his hotel room, Jesse had been active on his phone. He carried out a series of internet searches. He looked up hottest fire, flesh-eating birds, and Waitakere Ranges, the very area where he would later attempt to conceal Grace's body. After this, he browsed a pornography site. He then took several intimate photographs of Grace's body. Just over a month after Grace was found, hundreds of people filled Brentwood Cathedral in Essex to say goodbye to her at her funeral. Detective Inspector Scott Beard, who had guided the case from its earliest moments, flew to England to be present and to stand alongside the Millane family in their grief. 6 days after Grace was laid to rest, Jesse appeared before the High Court and entered a plea of not guilty. His trial commenced in November of that year. It would run for just 3 weeks. Throughout much of the proceedings, Jesse sat expressionless, his face revealing nothing. Occasionally, he cast his eyes down toward the papers in front of him. Occasionally, he lowered his head into his hands, but largely he remained still and unmoved. Jesse's defense team did not dispute that Grace had died in his hotel room. What they disputed was the manner of her death. They argued that what had taken place was a tragic accident, the result of consensual rough sex that had gone devastatingly wrong. They put forward the claim that Grace had previously engaged in similar sexual encounters, and that on this occasion it had been a catastrophic case of sexual misadventure. Jesse, they said, had simply been overtaken by panic when he realized what had happened, and had attempted to conceal her body as a result.
The defence case is that this is not a murder. And that's still what I say to you now. Nothing has changed. It was an accidental death that took place in the context of sexual activities that, if done incorrectly by inexperienced and/or intoxicated people, can go wrong.
The prosecution, however, had assembled a formidable body of evidence. Their position was unambiguous. Jesse had not panicked. This had not been an accident. What he had done was deliberate, calculated, and intentional. In the hours and days that followed Grace's death, he had moved with cold composure, constructing what they described as a labyrinth of storytelling and lies as he went.
In this case, to have killed Grace Millane, the defendant, gentleman over here at the back behind me, had to have had her under his grip, suffocating her, strangling her is probably the correct term, for a total of 5 to 10 minutes, at some point of which she lost consciousness and would have become, under his hand hold, unconscious and limp and lifeless, and he had to carry on. And if that's not reckless murder in this country, ladies and gentlemen, somebody will have to explain to me what is.
Do you find the defendant, Jesse Kempson, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
On December 22nd, 2019, after just 5 hours of deliberation, Jesse Kempson was found guilty of the murder of Grace Millane. He was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years.
You are a large and powerful man. She was diminutive. In those circumstances, Ms. Millane was particularly vulnerable. You were in a position of total physical dominance.
On a daily basis, I torment myself over what you did to my Grace. The terror and pain she must have experienced at your hands. As a mother, I would have done anything to change places with her. I sit full of guilt, knowing I couldn't help her, but I should have been there. She died terrified and alone in a room with you.
The verdict of murder today will be welcomed by every member of the Millane family and friends of Grace. It will not reduce the pain, the suffering that we've had to endure for over the past year. Grace was taken away from us in the most brutal fashion a year ago, and our lives have been, and family have been ripped apart. This will be with us for the rest of our lives. We would like to thank several people. Auckland Police Force, been professional, diligent and thorough all through this investigation. Last but not least, we would love to thank the people of New Zealand. They've opened their hearts to Grace and her family. I cannot express our gratitude enough for all the offers and gifts of kindness that we've received over the last year.
I've always thought that if it wasn't Grace, it was going to be someone. Now, I'm not a psychologist, so I can't talk about psychological profile, but what we do know is he's a liar. You know, a number of times we proved he lied to the police, he lied to others.
The case had stirred widespread outrage, far beyond the courtroom. Many people were deeply troubled by the way Grace's life had been portrayed during the trial, and by the manner in which her killer had attempted to frame her death. The feeling among many was that the defense's position had been nothing short of grotesque victim blaming, a deliberate and shameful attempt to redirect responsibility away from the man who had taken her life. Jesse's own family did not spare him either. Those closest to him branded him a pathetic fantasist. His stepbrother said he had lied over pointless things his entire life, continuing to fabricate until there was simply no way out, at which point he would collapse, cry, and run. Following his conviction for Grace's murder in that highly publicized trial, Jesse faced 2 further trials the following year. Both were judge-alone proceedings with no jury present. 2 women had come forward to police after recognizing the blurred figure in the footage that had circulated following Jesse's arrest for Grace's murder. They knew immediately who they were looking at, and each of them carried a devastating story. In the first of these trials, held in October 2020, a former partner gave testimony about the sustained physical, sexual, emotional, and financial abuse she had endured throughout her relationship with Jesse. He had held knives to her throat. He had choked her. He had forced her to perform sex acts. He had drained her bank account of $10,000. Jesse was found guilty on 8 charges and handed a sentence of 7.5 years. In November 2020, he was brought before the courts again. This time, the charge was rape. The victim was a young British tourist he had encountered on Tinder 8 months before he murdered Grace Millane. He had forced himself on her and told her directly, "If you don't do this, I will kill you, and I will kill your family, and you know I will." Jesse was found guilty and sentenced to a further 3.5 years. Combined, the 2 additional sentences totaled 11 years, to run concurrently alongside the sentence already imposed for Grace's murder. When Justice Geoffrey Venning delivered the guilty verdict for the rape charge, Jesse responded with a furious outburst from the dock.
You're so full of You have no reason to convict me. You're full of
Tragically, in November 2020, Grace's father, David Millane, passed away after a battle with cancer. In December 2020, the name suppression order that had shielded Jesse's identity finally came to an end, after the Supreme Court dismissed his last attempt to appeal his sentence for Grace's murder. It is alleged that Jesse continues to pursue appeals against both of the sentences handed down in the 2020 trials. In the wake of everything, those who loved Grace chose to channel their grief into something meaningful. Her family and friends rallied behind the White Ribbon Campaign, a charity dedicated to ending male violence against women by actively engaging men and boys to take a stand and challenge harmful behaviors. In Grace's name, they raised over £11,000, setting a record for the campaign. The Love Grace campaign was also established in her honor. It calls for donations of handbags filled with essential items, channeling support to women seeking safety and refuge from abusive and dangerous relationships. Grace Emmy Rose Millane was 22 years old. She was curious, generous, and full of life. She had donated her hair to children she would never meet. She had set off into the world with open arms and an open heart. She deserved to come home.